And Ryan, of course, is our colleague developing all kinds of new products and protocols. Ryan, one of the things that I think doctors should do is start learning, and there are a lot of health providers actually, not just here but around the world, from Chile to Shanghai, China, to around the world. And a lot of the countries have a history of what are called nutraceutical development. Like China goes back, at least 2,500 to 3,000 years. Europe, several thousand years. What we're doing now is we're combining the best of Eastern and Western medicine. So we have now things like gene SNPs, organic acids, functional medicine tests, combined with advanced use of medical imaging and electrophysiology, like quantitative electroencephalograms of the brain. And we use a combination of technologies to validate the nutraceuticals are superior and non-toxic to, quote, toxic and dangerous drugs. Drugs do three things that are particularly bad. They produce nutrient deficiencies. They block important enzyme pathways. So if you use non-steroidals, for example, they block prostaglandins in the brain, in the heart muscle, and in peripheral tissues such as the gut wall, so you can end up with erosions and or rupture or bleeding. The second thing that they do is they actually block specific enzyme pathways that can cause serious damage. And a lot of time they actually interfere directly with mitochondrial metabolism. 2/3 of the drugs given to cardiac patients directly screw up your mitochondria, which is 2/3 of the dry weight of your heart. And most of the dry weight of your arterial endothelial walls is mitochondria. And that's particularly stupid that cardiologists, in particular and general internists, do not know the biochemistry, that if you give a diabetic an HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor rather than omega cod liver liquid, which head-to-head actually will reduce lipid disorders better with its side effects. You actually, with the omega cod liver liquid, don't get side effects. When you use something like Crestor, you're actually inducing mitochondrial dysfunction and accelerating heart failure. Same with beta blockers. They directly screw up your tocopherols to protect your ion channels, and calcium channel blockers actually cause shrinkage of your brain and reduction of IQ. You can actually see anatomical shrinking of your brain if you're on calcium channel blockers for 5 years with an average of 30 to 50 point drop in IQ. Measurable. So when people don't realize that drugs are dangerous, short-term maybe, in emergency department, long-term never, and the intervention should be based on genetics, functional medicine, living pathology tests that actually measure how your body is functioning, and detoxification. So when I see somebody with, say, congestive heart failure, first thing I think of is they got free iron elevation, and they've got heavy metals, and they've got mitochondrial dysfunction, so they can't produce ATP. Their electron transport chain is messed up, and they don't have adequate generation of carnitine metabolism, which is, by the way, made by your kidneys and liver. And if you don't have the adequate substrate for that, or you're blocking it with real nasty drugs, like, for example, HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, you're not going to make L-carnitine. And the real danger here is that people don't understand that once you cause the damage, it can be a long road back to get normal function again. But natural nutraceuticals, the doctors should reach first for the protocol pad rather than the script pad, the quick and dirty and dangerous drug pad that we know now, even with the ACE inhibitors and ACE receptor blockers, it directly blocks your stem cells. So how can you heal when you're doing that? How can you heal when you take steroids that interfere with collagen if you're trying to help? How can you heal a knee that's not sore anymore because you took your non-steroidals, but now you're on your way to getting knee replacement because 5 years or 10 years of using them when you play weekend golf has chewed up your joint because you can't repair it? And the doctors damn well know this. I mean, most doctors that have 2 clues now realize that non-steroidals do accelerate knee generation or hip degeneration, but they don't care because they don't know the alternative. And if we teach them, it's real simple. Start off with things that are going to regenerate cartilage, like Joint Performance, Collagen Max, and Tendon Mender. Start using things that are going to help regenerate the tissues and the bones so that you actually don't end up in these pickles that you can't get out with drugs and in the unnecessary and dangerous and inappropriate use of surgery, when there are appropriate times when surgery is appropriate. Then it's used only in the extreme cases where the person has gone too far and they have to have surgical interventions. Just like bowel cancer. Bowel cancer is caused by dysbiosis. If you do a CDSA2 at Genova Metametrics lab or Data Doctors or other laboratories, you can identify the abnormal pathogens. You can see deconjugating bacteria that release toxins back into your bloodstream and your liver and brain. And you wonder why people get pancreatic or brain cancer or breast cancer. You shouldn't wonder. They've got a chronic dysbiosis releasing conjugated toxins back into the bloodstream. I mean, duh. I've known this for 30-some years, and I try to teach other doctors, and it's not open to question, by the way. A lot of people think they have a right to an opinion on these issues. They don't. Because facts are just facts. Just like the sun rises in the morning, toxins, you can measure them with certified labs with high-pressure chromatography, nuclear spectroscopy. It's not open to somebody's damned opinion. I find it aggravating for people to think they have a right to an opinion on something that's hard science. It's not open. What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't debate you. That's for sure.
I think I think that the thing is, there is a place for emergency drugs. There's a place for surgery. Of course, I'm trained as a surgeon. The only surgery I haven't done is open heart and brain. I've done vascular surgery, plastics, orthopedics, intensive care, trauma, burn units. It's very appropriate when it's required. But the problem is we don't do all the augmentation to make sure that the soil of the tissues can heal. For example, after somebody does plastic surgery, and recently talked to a plastic surgeon and said, hey, why don't you give your people, Collagen Max? And he got so excited about the fact that you take Collagen Max to triple the rate of the collagen regeneration because it bridges across the wound when they make the nice surgical incisions and fix someone's face, or they do a lipectomy or fix something else like, augmentation or whatever it is. They just get all excited and say, wow, I can do that and it'll make me even look like a better surgeon. Of course it will, because you got better tissues. Just like the same with the cardiac doctors. Do you want to be the cardiac doctor that your patients don't all die in 5 years of heart failure, or half of them? 50% case fatality rate? What do you want to have, maybe like a 2% case fatality rate because they're non-compliant rather than 50%? Yes. And you want to use less drugs, and you want to use things like extracorporeal counterpulsation therapy and other treatments like hyperbaric oxygen at home that actually work, and you validate that you've removed the heavy metals from their body, you've increased mitochondrial function, you can actually test the organic acids through the organics test through Genova Labs, and then validate that you've actually restored normal mitochondrial oxidative metabolism. You can prove all these things. It's not open to question. That's so people think that's just your opinion, Deagle. No, it's not my opinion. It's science. Sorry, you just weren't taught that yet. Let's bring into the 21st century. That's why when I argue with people, including health professionals, nurses, and doctors, and they want to argue with me, it gets to be very unpleasant. They realize after a while, I said, no, you're not going to talk anymore. I'm going to lecture to you, and you're going to listen, because this is science. I can send you the references. I can send you the information. I can give you the validation of the labs that are federally certified and the imaging studies to prove that what I'm saying is the truth. Not a truth, but the truth. And I get a little irritated when I have people now, after all the years of persecution I've gone through asking tough questions and validating with science, that I have what I call numbskull doctors and nurses that think they know better than Dr. Deagle, and that's just not the case. They may get aggravated. I tell them, if you're aggravated, turn off the radio, walk away, and stay ignorant and suffer, because you will. Okay? So, I don't take any captives. I treat people with kindness and honesty. I treat their ignorance with violence. Okay? It needs to be treated with violence. It doesn't need to be treated nicely or say, that's okay, you can have your opinion. No, it's not okay. If you can prove to me wrong, do it. I'm more than willing to accept that if you can prove me wrong. Show scientific validation. Don't quote the usual garbage. You don't have a placebo-controlled double blah, 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 study. I said, that works with Wistar rats that are genetically identical, having the same gruel diet, are in little cages and do the same amount of physical activity, and are exposed to the same toxin. It doesn't work with polymorphic people that have different background, genetics, nutritional status, and toxic status. It doesn't work. So anybody who wants to quote double-blind placebo-controlled trials, most of the trials that are being done where they know the nutrients or even the drugs will save people or reduce danger, they're unethical. They're just plain unethical. And it's important people grasp that. So when we come back, we're going to dissect more things. And if you think you have a better opinion about these things than Dr. Deagle, challenge me. I'm willing to learn. But if you come into my cage, says Spider-Man, it's going to be an unpleasant day for you. Come on in. 800-259-5791. Just like Captain James T. Kirk. Brian, we have a caller, but we go through the screening process. And that screening process involves I call the gauntlet of Deagle's questionitis. Firstly, you have to lay down your specific questions and be very specific. The exact statements that you want to make, and if you go through that gauntlet and have a really good point, including points that make me look stupid, I don't mind looking stupid if I am stupid. People always think like, you're arrogant, Deagle. No, I'm not. I'm like a little child who opens my eyes in the morning and think, wait, I know nothing. The universe unfolds before me, and I realize what's even more disturbing is I know nothing. But when people think they know more than me, it's disturbing when I realize just how ignorant I am. And that's what scares me. It scares me to see a scientific profession wringing their hands and say we can't solve Fukushima and the intertidal region in the Georgia Strait is dying. It disturbs me that we boil water with fissionable nuclear materials and yet we have tokamak fusion reactors. It disturbs me that health professions haven't been able to cure any disease that's occurred in the 20th century by their stupid trillion-dollar funding, because the medical business would ruin itself, just like that play from Voltaire. It would ruin itself if it actually started to heal people rather than treat them. Not a good thing. It's bad business model is what it is. So you must give your exact question. And so, Ryan, let's start off with some of the latest topics. I know that you're going to be doing some talks yourself. And the doctors, you need to kind of realize that, enter this as a child. Enter it as if you know nothing. I don't care if you're in practice 30 years and you're a surgeon, you think you know everything. Hopefully you're humble enough after a while, like I am, to realize I know very little, but what I do know, I have been honest about. And when I wake up in the morning, I research things and realize, whoa, I didn't know that. And I get taught by people who are grandmothers who just ask good questions. And sometimes nurses and doctors, but by and large, most of the time I find MD does stand for Magnificent Deity. And RN stands for Royal Nurse. And unfortunately, when people think they know everything, they can't be taught. The old story is the man who knows everything can be taught nothing. The person who is a child opens their eyes and realizes that the world is a world of wonder, both horror and delight, and can ask questions. And the pathway to bravery, righteousness, and wisdom is asking tough questions that no one else dares to ask. Even if you don't have the answers, asking really good questions allows you to own the truth, whether it's the truth about your health, the geopolitics, or spirituality, which is why I'm a Messianic Christian believer, because I asked the tough questions and I got the answer. There is only one God. I asked the questions, there's only one truth. I asked the questions that the biochemistry of a living person and their epigenetics determines whether they live or die. Not how many toxic drugs they can pour into their carcass before they die. I call it pre-embalming. It's a very disturbing pathway that we've created a medical business out of something that should have been the business of taking care of people's health, which we don't do. So, Ryan, let's pick up a couple of interesting protocols. One of the ones I want to talk about first is thyroid and adrenal. It's amazing how many people's thyroid and adrenal function is marginal. And these two horses pull the plow of the cellular metabolism of your body. They're also directly tied to your gut. Berberstatin, for example, helps release TRH or proteolin, which helps peripheral conversion. If you don't have adequate levels of selenium, the 5' deiodinase doesn't work. There's actually 7 minerals necessary for your thyroid to work peripherally. And if your thyroid's failing or your adrenal's failing, your thyroid will fail. So you see elevated cortisol levels in someone who has marginal thyroid function. And if you see somebody who's extremely stressed, they'll also start to switch over from making T3 to reverse T3. So if your doctor doesn't measure free reverse T3 when they measure your test of T3, they're a dummy. And they're not doing you any good whatsoever, because you can have normal T3 levels, free T3, and normal T4, and you don't necessarily need thyroid hormone. You need thyroid glandular support. You need a reversal from creating reverse thyroid hormone by things that will increase your peripheral conversion, like selenium, which is in, by the way, our nutraceuticals, Vitamin Mineral Max Minerals Plus. You'll need specific things to support the proper conversion. So like mitothyroid, which is thyroid adrenal hypothalamus, and our adrenal support, which isn't just adrenal, it's a whole series of glandulars. So Ryan, let's talk about this for a minute, because a lot of people don't realize how simple and also how complex these things are, including endocrinologists who pretend to be all-knowing in these areas. They aren't.
You're absolutely right. I mean, people try to just pigeonhole this into a simple box that one medication solves the problem. And I think almost anybody out there listening is on the same page with you. As the fact is, you're trying to control this very complex system, and you're running around just pushing on and off light switches with certain drugs. And you're kind of going, it doesn't seem like it works because you can only control this one light, which only controls this one mechanism. It's not really working the whole, if you will, house.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is what's kind of different about, when you talk about the Nutrimedical, the philosophy, is that if you can just use nature, instead of saying it's an on-off switch, it's much more like using dimmer switches everywhere, and that one thing can lead to another. That's the beauty of nature, is that one ingredient doesn't mean that it's classified to one specific light switch. That's just not how it works. And that's the beauty of so many of these different nutrients and ingredients. So when you take a formulation like you're saying, where you're talking about adrenal glandulars, you're not only using a glandular substance, which means it's basically derived from a gland of an animal. So for the example of the adrenal, being able to use that substance that comes out of New Zealand, Argentina, it also is going to bring in things like the parotid, the thymus, the spleen. Why? It's so that you can balance, as you've talked about many times before, Dr. Bill, the way that the body is kind of like multiple horses pulling. They need to be going in the same direction. You can't have them splitting them apart. They need to be reined in and working together. And so when it comes to your adrenals, the thyroid, the hypothalamus in the brain, the spleen, all of this stuff, if it's not working in concert, oftentimes you're going to throw it out of balance.
Including the autonomic nervous system. For example, when we have things like Minerals Plus, it has orotate form of lithium that helps to calm you. When you have Calm Mind, it has xanthine, L-theanine, GABA, and myo-inositol, which calms the nervous system. When we have Cardivite, it has specific things like valerian to calm the nervous system. You have to balance everything. And the best way to think of it is the body has a maestro of the orchestra of the cells. And the main instruments are minerals, and the wind instruments are all the vitamins in their activated state. And if you don't have all of the parts of the orchestra, especially the maestro, which is the scalar frequencies of the vibration and solution of water, which is a informational superconductor, and the cell membranes, which act as liquid crystal microprocessors, you don't have an orchestra called life. Every cell is a supercomputer, is a quantum parallel supercomputer. And if you start thinking of life as a song and as an orchestra, rather than, you press this key and you block this pathway like a linear system, it's a non-linear system. And this idea of placebo double-controlled trials, it's not only unethical, it's stupid. It doesn't work. What you need to do is measure specific parameters that you want to do as a measure of whether or not what you're doing works. For example, if somebody says, Dr. Deagle, put together a protocol to help my son with autism. And when we come back, we've got a question, too, from Brad in Las Vegas. We'll take that first. But autism, I'll show exactly how my procedure, which is going to come out in the books on quantum functional medicine, that'll be coming out real soon, the first of a series, how it differs from any other approach out there on how you can get well. It incorporates the best of medicine, the best of functional medicine, genetics, and bioengineering with nutrients. Come back, and Ryan, we're going to weave a question here from Brad into the use of nutraceuticals and public health policy. And I mentioned specific steps, whether we're dealing with Fukushima, which my book will be released shortly. I have relatives here now and won't be releasing until next week, right before or around the time of the Labor Day super sale, which is coming up over Labor Day weekend. And that's a sale on top of a sale. Brad in Las Vegas, you had a question. Go ahead with your question on aircraft.
Yes. Do you think we should call our senators and local airports and maybe even Obama and ask if they would put HEPA filters back into the aircraft, and that this would be our only protection at this point would be the airline?
The most likely way the most likely way of someone getting infected is in a closed culture tube called a flying aluminum tube called an aircraft. There are other ways, of course, that they arrive by boat and are in the terminal phases and so on, but the chances are considerably less. The most likely way for an international pathogen to arrive here is in an aircraft. And they may fly through an alternative route, so it's not just flying from these three main countries like Sierra Leone and etc. So they had these in all aircraft until the early 80s, and the FAA here in America and elsewhere decided to pull them. They should reinstitute them, and every aircraft should have a chain of custody with a biohazard bag, sent out to a CDC-certified lab for multi-drug resistant TB, viruses, pathogens, etc. And they should then clear all aircraft by ozonating them and spreading them with silver 100 spray to kill off all known pathogens. That should happen before an aircraft is re-released to the public. The same way they should be ozonating all luggage, because when it comes off these aircraft, the luggage is being mixed in mixed containers, and it can carry pathogens on the luggage itself. that the luggage compartment should be ozonated as well, and the luggage before it's released to the public, because on the external surfaces, if your luggage touches someone else's when they've had bodily fluids on it, there is a possibility of airborne spread. And that's a big lie that the World Health Organization is saying it's not airborne. The number of health professionals that have already died indicates that with moderate protection, not complete protection, which is a level 4 negative pressure suit, that they are spreading the virus, and it is killing people, and it is a new version of the virus. And we posted up a few days ago that the Center for Disease Control and one of their contract labs in Sierra Leone is directly responsible for this new upgraded biological weapon called the new 2014 Ebola. The World Health Organization wants a super plague, which is why when I traveled to Zurich, Switzerland in 1997, March 16th, they actually gave me the documents that the World Health Organization was trying to rebuild the swine flu from 1918 with gene fragments. They even went back to try to exhume virus from dead people in Alaska in the permafrost, and thought that they might be able to exhume the bodies that were buried in permafrost so that they could actually rebuild the virus. And it was only until they got the gene bioengines in the early 90s that they are actually able to rebuild the fragments with supercomputers to rebuild the virus. So the WHO and the World Health Organization, United Nations, already have treaties signed because they want to enter a full New World Order control and martial law through a biological weapon, because they have to have collaboration and cooperation by the public. Any other form of martial law will be resisted, but one where people feel they're at more danger if they don't collaborate with the government or the control system, which includes the World Health Organization, will be resisted. And it can't just be in one nation like America or the West. It has to be worldwide. So you know that they're trying to use plagues to try to bring in the New World Order and a biometric authentication system. That's not open to debate. That's the only way they can do it. And so if you have these simple steps, HEPA filters, chain of custody, cleaning aircraft, if someone has been in these countries for whatever reason, even for a day, they need to be quarantined for 1 month, and they should have serial serums done, and they need to be individually quarantined, not mass quarantined, so they don't cross-contaminate each other. Because if one person out of 50 in a quarantine facility has the virus and is shedding it crazily before they develop DIC, they're going to infect everybody else, so they're going to increase the danger of further spread. So that's the real problem. And then, of course, you create another situation where now these people who are going to be released at that month period have now been exposed to someone who is shedding virus, and now the next 30 days, they're now contacting their friends and relatives and spreading the virus further, so you've got an explosive plague in America. People think it can't happen. Think again. This is a whole new game. And it's not just Ebola, it's things like swine avian flu or H7N9, which replicates faster than any other flu virus in history. Once they have the proper motives for martial law, they'll first close down, which they've done in South Korea and in Kenya, air traffic. Then they'll start to close down everything, and eventually, once they declare martial law, they'll close down alternative communications, including the internet. They'll close down banking and the financial systems for financial transactions, because this is going to cause a world economic financial collapse. Hot spots are being picked up, for example, with the SARS beta coronavirus across Europe, and people arriving there with the SARS beta coronavirus in Pisa, Italy, and elsewhere earlier this year. The same thing's going to happen, and we'll probably be hit with multiple plagues, and they'll wait too late after doing too little, so they can do too much to us that doesn't make sense, and it'll probably increase the danger of people getting infected. So, yeah, it's a good question, and hopefully that's an answer. Now, in terms of treatment, people should be starting now with our Ebola protection kit, our first-line defense kit, which means if you go on an aircraft, have a mask on, and have defense wipes in a Ziploc bag so you can wipe down contact surfaces like door handles, toilet seats, etc. You need to be taking things like Allicin Med, Nutrimedical, Silver 100. You need to be taking immunoglobulins like Immunomax and Nutrimune capsules, high-dose Power C to prevent a cytokine storm, because that's what's going to kill you is the cytokine storm. The virus doesn't kill you. It's your own immune system releasing massive amounts of cytokines that cause a disseminated intravascular coagulopathy where you bleed to death by your own immune response to the presence of a massive load of virus in your body. So I hope that answers your question. So we have a government that's willingly and purposely incompetent and evil, an FAA that is out to lunch, an international airline association, and governments of the world, and the United Nations World Health Organization aren't declaring what's evident to anybody with two clues that this virus is airborne, and other plagues are coming. We have multi-drug resistant TB, We've got H7N9, we've got beta coronavirus, which is not going away, and swine flu now, it's re-entering through Mexico, Central and South America. So thank you, Mr. Obama, who's the most incompetent president in history. Thank you, FAA, who are evil. Thank you, United Nations, who are just waiting and drooling to use this to declare medical martial law to the planet. Does that make sense?
Oh, my friend.
It's not open to really. It's pretty hard. I mean, if people can attack my thesis, please.
No.
But it's so obvious that they can't. I mean, these are easy things to do. I recommended this to the FBI and CDC national directors in March of 2001. This is 6 months before 9/11, and I had a private lunch with them because I was sitting there with the director of infectious disease from the VA hospital at the University of Colorado, because I was a point man under Reserve Admiral John Hughes on Operation Top Off in Dark Winter, and we had hazmat officers going and EMTs going to St. Joe's, Presbyterian, St. Luke's, and other main hospitals in Denver in a war game simulation, and we basically killed everybody. In other words, we didn't identify whether a pathogen or radiological release would happen. We didn't identify the cross-contamination or infection of anybody who had a sprayer out of the second-floor window in the 17th Avenue Mall. And if people had been taking things like our nutraceuticals and wearing masks and using wipes, they would have had a natural barrier, because airplanes, if you cough in the back and you got multi-drug-resistant TB, or you're got blood and mucus mixed in your airway and you're spitting up or vomiting in the toilet, and you're then coughing into an air vent, and it's sucking it in and then blowing it in everybody else's face, and within 2 minutes in the front of the aircraft, you could potentially give it an inoculum or sufficient amount of virus to produce an infective state. And that's what's really crazy about this, is that we don't have any decontamination of laptop havens, airport restrooms, aircraft before they re-release them, or the luggage compartment. Nothing's being done by anybody that makes sense.
We get a little antibacterial spray, sir. We're okay.
Well, yeah, not antibacterial, antiviral, because you can kill some bacteria, but you kill off I call the Arnold bugs, and the Wally bugs are dead, but the Arnold bugs, they think it's vitamins, and the viruses aren't even affected at all. So when you use these antibacterial soaps, viruses aren't touched. And that's the same thing with even the current system with chloramines for your water, chlorine. It doesn't kill viruses. But our nutraceuticals will. Get them in your body. If you're going to travel, wear a mask and have the defense wipes. And don't trust your government. They're trying to shepherd you into a new world order. If you don't think this is really happening, keep paying attention. Ask good questions. You'll find out the hard way. It's a mundane task of making people well. One of the things I want to talk about, let's talk about Gamma E+. We had a lot of requests, people wanting and I posted up, by the way, the info sheet so they can see that there. It supports antioxidant protection. It supports healthy cytokine balance in your body to prevent inflammation. It supports healthy cardiovascular, nervous, and reproductive systems, and it provides both mixed tocopherols and tocotrienols. I like to summarize it and says it protects your ion channels to allow the Axeman, which is calcium ions, to come into the cell when it needs to come in and do something, like a special delta force, and then kick its butt back out the cell so it doesn't cause havoc like an Axeman chopping away at your DNA and your cellular structures. And if you don't have all the tocopherols, including gamma tocopherol, tocotrienols, and tocotrienols and tocopherols, you're going to end up with serious cellular damage to your ion channels. And the problem is that it's not really optional. If you take certain drugs, for example, if you take a beta blocker, like carvedilol, and metoprolol, and any of these other propranolol, long-acting propranolol, you're going to damage your ion channels. If you take Calan, or any type of calcium channel blocker like Plendil, which we used to call Plendil for plenty of edema, because you get tons of it, these things are real dangerous. And I tell people gamma tocopherol is really important, especially to stop peroxynitrate radical that is activated after children get stacked vaccines, after people get exposure to radiation, if they get radiation cerebritis, or they get exposure to an ECMO machine and heart-lung bypass, or they get a bonk on the head. If your gamma tocopherol levels are low, you can't protect your brain from upregulating enzyme pathways that make your brain go on fire for not days, not months, but years. So when someone gets bonked on the head bad in the National Football League, if they have the genetic predisposition to a post-traumatic upregulation of enzyme pathways and have adequate levels of gamma tocopherol, they're going to have induction of peroxynitrate radical forever. frying their neurons, as they say down the coast, deep fried neurons, and like catfish. So not a good thing. So let's go into some more details about gamma E. And I tell people this goes along with things like our magnesium glycinate malate. It goes in with phospholipids to protect your brain, like Nutrifos and Neurogen, that stimulates new nerve cells to grow. So Ryan, let's talk about gamma E+. And by the way, the so-called competitors out there don't have our formula, which is superior to all products, because if it was a really better product than ours, we'd sell it.
Right.
We don't have...
I mean, you see that with the Nutrimed line of products that continues to experience, upgrades in the formulations that are offered. You don't just sit on your laurels and say, hey, this is a pretty good thing, let's just stick with that,
Right.
We're always you got to continue to advance, because the science is advancing of what to use, how to use it, but also the other side of it is the bioavailability of things is becoming much better understood for how the body's going to utilize certain nutrients to the best of their advantage. You want to make sure you can take advantage of that, because I'll just use the word half-life. And people go, some scientists out there go, okay, yeah, I got you on half-life. What we don't think about is how long is anything really staying around in our bodies anyway? If you want to take something like a basic antioxidant, it can be wiped out in a matter of minutes to hours. You use stuff that, is indirect antioxidants, the things you find in Regenerex or Ageless and many of the formulations of Nutrimed. How long can those last, those indirect antioxidants? Days on end. Well, which one might provide for better protection? Well, research tells us that if we can get ingredients like sulforaphane glucosinolates or methylated resveratrol or high levels of curcuminoids in our bodies and good water extracted green tea, it performs better. And that's the story with vitamin E. There's studies out there. You start using synthetic vitamin E, or you use these, what you call is singular tocopherol formulations like alpha tocopherol. What you're actually doing is inhibiting the whole plant complex that vitamin E is derived from. You're actually inhibiting a lot of the benefit that you're looking for. And it's because people go, well, isn't it all the same? I mean, who really cares?
Yeah, right.
You got to work with people who do care, and like Dr. Bill, who's looking at the research to say, hey, look, that's not the way to do it, and there's a very good explanation for why you take this synthetic vitamin E, and it will not work for you, or it could be harmful to you. So people, buyer beware. Yeah, they really need to pay attention to this. And there's so many good solutions now available, and it continues to grow. So vitamin E is just one of those aspects that if you're going for the cardiovascular protection, people use it for abnormal cells. Vitamin E is very fundamental, but you must make sure you're using this true blend of tocopherols and tocotrienols, so you get the full plant complex.
Exactly, yeah. That's why Regenerex is so good. That's why Nutritrala. Yeah. See, regular alpha-lipoic acid has a half-life of 8 minutes. So 4 half-lives or half an hour, it's gone. So when people say, I take ALA, yeah, but it's gone in half an hour. If you take Nutritrala, it's going to last 8 to 12 hours. If you take cell detox glutathione, you're not just talking about taking, I take whey protein, or I take some protein from, say, hemp. Those are all good. But they're, level 3. Level 1 is Nutritrala, Regenerex, cell detox glutathione, because it's not just long-acting in terms of its pharmacokinetics. It's also gene-inductive. It actually turns on genes that last for days, 2 or 3 days. And so if you're taking this daily, it changes your whole biochemistry. For example, I yesterday talked to a diabetic, 2 days ago, a diabetic, who now after 25 years of being diabetic wants to protect their kidneys and their eyes, so they're going to take ultrathymine B1. We know it protects the blood vessels. We know it protects the kidneys from glycation. We know it protects the glomeruli from microalbuminuria, which means it's going to damage the glomeruli if you don't take these things. So ultrathymine B1 is not optional. If you're diabetic and you want to have kidneys 5 or 10 years from now, you better damn well be taking the fat-soluble ultrathymine B1, or you're going to be cooked. You're going to be on a dialysis machine. You're going to end up with retinal damage, like retinopathy that's going to accelerate because you're diabetic. You're going to end up with elevated vascular endothelial growth factor, because we know elevated insulin in the face of low levels of activated fat-soluble thiamine causes pretty serious vascular disease to the eye. And when you get new fragile blood vessels, you can rupture them underneath the Bruch's membrane and end up going blind. It's not really a funny thing to be diabetic and have some idiot going around with a laser zapping fragile capillaries in the back of your eye because you didn't take this to heed, and there's no drug that can do what the fat-soluble thiamine can do. There isn't. There's no alternative. If there was an alternative, believe me, the drug companies, if they could add a methyl side group and then charge you $200 a pill, they do it. And they've tried, by the way. The drug companies have tried to take different nutraceuticals and get a patent on them and add a little side group to change the pharmacokinetics marginally so the body can't degrade it. And then they try to get a patent on it. It's disgusting when you see that kind of behavior, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is.
Weird.
And, as you were talking to that gentleman that called in, you can be overwhelmed by why, shouldn't somebody step in and fix the airplane or do this or do that? I love how you turn it back to empower yourselves. I mean, the world's always been a tough place to live, and it's not going to get any easier. However, the tools that God gives us now, we have so many good tools so that, you don't have to be victims here. There's plenty of things you can do. And listening to this program, number one, is one of the best steps you can have because now you're on the insider knowledge level. And then from there, apply what you're learning to your lives and watch what happens. I love the stories that end up coming back on the Nutrimeds where they're like, I always get sick this time of year. When I get on an airplane, this happens. And I'm not even talking about these catastrophic exposures, but just the general cold and flus and stress. Yeah,
their nose flares up, they get a sinus infection.
Being neutralized, and they're like, it just shows you can do this. You can increase your defenses.
Yeah. Well, a good example right now. We have some visiting relatives, my son and his lady and little boy, and so on. They're really cute, and she's going to have a new baby next April, and they want to go out in the sun. And I said, well, you don't just slap on sun protection. These are what's called all-phenol solvents that actually induce skin cancer. So the drugs that are sold in the pharmacy to protect your skin induce skin cancer. If you want to protect your skin, first off, wear proper UV protection clothing and hats in midday. And if you do go out in the sun, go out later, put curcumin cream on your skin. Curcumin is going to block the dangerous damage to your skin and your DNA. And take orally DNA repairs such as Malignant Block, which is also an ageless, by the way, to protect your DNA from oxidative damage caused by sunlight. Take Vision Max to protect your eyes from the oxidative stress, and Nutritrala from going out in the sun, even when you wear sunglasses, so you don't end up with cataracts, pterygium, or retinal damage. These are simple things you can do to bulletproof yourself from a toxic world, to encapsulate yourself in a bubble of protection. Even though you travel, you go to restaurants, and 6 times a year people get exposed to food poisoning. Take Living Probiotic Ultra. Take things to normalize your gut pathogens. Recolonize them so you don't deconjugate your toxins and re-release them to your breasts if you're women, prostate if you're men, pancreas, brain, etc. We know what causes cancer. It's bad maintenance. You don't clear the toxins, you don't protect your DNA, just ass sloppy, and eventually, bad stuff will happen. Get your Nutrimeds every day. Stay well. As I say, stay well and prosper.